Hello and welcome to Hollywood at Home from Arizona Public Media. I'm Victoria Lucas. Tonight, we are pleased to present 1981's surprise hit and Oscar-winning Best Picture, Chariots of Fire. This deeply moving British historical drama stars Ben Cross, Ian Charleson, Ian Holm, and John Gielgud in a story about Olympic sprinters. Yes, men who run, but it isn't a sports movie. Well, not really. Chariots of Fire takes its two main characters, both outsiders from contrasting social and economic backgrounds, each with his own highly personal reason for running, and uses their competition to make larger statements about human nature. Even today, some 40 years after its release, the movie still resonates. It's a tribute to the passion that went into its making. And it all started with the case of the flu. In 1977, British producer David Putnam was taking a few sick days in a rented house in Los Angeles. Looking for something to read, he picked up a reference book about the Olympic Games. In it, he stumbled upon the story of British teammates Eric Liddell, a Scotsman born in China to Christian missionary parents who believed he was running for God, and Harold Abrams, the English son of well-to-do Jewish parents who ran to confront entrenched anti-Semitism. Putnam immediately responded to the potential themes of class and racial prejudice that might underlie their relationship as teammates. But he knew he'd need a special screenwriter to develop the story. For that, he chose actor-turned-screenwriter Colin Welland, known for his dry wit, love of sports, and creation of screenplays that, in his words, usually champion the individual against the system. As Putnam explained later, most English writing at the time was very good, but Colin's was more. It was about passion. Welland threw himself into research, studying newsreel clips of the real-life runners, as well as finding and interviewing relatives of the entire team and reading their surviving letters, all while trying to ignore the unasked question, how can a movie about English runners in the Olympics in 1924 hope to find an audience in the United States and around the world? Well, producer David Putnam hadn't produced 11 feature films and picked up an Oscar nomination for Midnight Express without learning a thing or two. To direct the movie, Putnam chose Hugh Hudson, an award-winning documentary and commercial director who, though he had no feature experience, was well known to Putnam from their early days together in advertising. Hudson and Putnam decided to cast unknown actors for the two lead roles so that, as Hudson put it, the audience would be running with them from the start. But finding and training the right ones would take time. So he first arranged to surround his stars with some of the great names of the English screen and stage, including John Gielgud, Lindsay Anderson, and Ian Holm. Then, with supporting cast in place, the filmmakers held a series of interviews with promising young actors to determine who would be invited to a rather different kind of audition on the track at a London stadium. Putnam knew the runners would need to look authentic on screen, which would require a more practiced eye than his own. So he hired Olympic coach Tom McNabb, a former runner himself, to be the film's sports consultant, warning him, "Tom, your job is to make sure the athletics look real. If they don't, we're stuffed." McNabb was dismayed at first when he saw the 31 skinny actors who'd been invited to the stadium for the audition, and some of them were equally dismayed by their lack of stamina once he started running them around the track. Many dropped out, but enough remained to put together a team. And as McNabb later remembered, I pointed out Ben Cross and Ian Charleson as the best candidates, and I heard Hugh and David let out sighs of relief. Those were the ones they wanted all along. The chosen ones then underwent a 3-month track and field boot camp under McNabb's supervision, where they became a tight-knit group before filming began. And what a beginning it was. You've probably seen the wonderfully evocative opening sequence on the beach, which was, in fact, the first sequence to be filmed. And if you haven't seen it, you are in for a treat. However, it did not come easily. The cast and crew arrived at the beach early on day one and were confronted by an absolutely flat ocean, as cinematically boring as pavement, with not a ripple in sight. But with neither time nor money to waste and no alternative set ready for filming, they had to go ahead and shoot despite their disappointment. But then the movie gods smiled upon them. When the film came back from the lab the next day, Putnam and Hudson discovered that the negative had been scratched by a wayward grain of sand inside the camera, and that's covered by production insurance, so they were able to go back and reshoot. This time, the wind was up, creating visually stunning waves with light that almost seemed to dance across them. Cinematographer David Watkin filmed the scene in just 2 shots, one wide and one close. And combined with composer Vangelis's amazing musical score, it has since become a classic. Another stroke of luck came much later with the climactic scenes at the Paris Olympics. The production's limited budget meant there wasn't nearly enough money to pay the 7,000 extras they would need for the main grandstand. Remember, this was in the days before computer-generated audiences could be inserted into empty seats. So producer Putnam came up with a plan to attract crowds who would work for free. Why not have a day-long raffle? Every hour, there would be a drawing for a vacuum cleaner, a washing machine, television, motorbike, even a Ford Fiesta, all to be given away to those extras who stayed around. All well and good, but they couldn't stay around if they hadn't shown up in the first place. Putnam later remembered, "We had a start time of 9 o'clock, and at 8:45, the stadium was still empty. It was one of the most terrifying moments of my life. But then, as if in a movie, we started to see them coming over the brow of the hill, first hundreds, then thousands, with a surprising number wearing period clothes. We gave the rest period hats, along with programs to wave, and we got the crowd shots we needed." The film opened in a single London theater to somewhat mixed reviews and poor audiences. On opening day, Putnam phoned the box office every 2 hours and got the bad news that the theater was less than a third full. Well, that's it, he thought. It's over. Film critic Roger Ebert later remembered his conversation with producer David Putnam and director Hugh Hudson during the 1981 Cannes Film Festival. They wondered whether they would find a global market for the movie, as there was scarcely an American involved in the story. The events had happened nearly 60 years earlier. The lead actors were relatively unknown, and the anachronistic musical score was composed and performed by one man on a synthesizer. But then, word started to get out, and audiences started to build and build and build until Putnam and Hudson had a monster hit on their hands. Chariots won Oscars for Best Picture, Best Original Screenplay, Best Costume Design, and Best Original Score for Vangelis, the one-man band. It went on to earn nearly $60 million worldwide. So now, please, sit back, maybe wearing your running shoes, and enjoy this 98-year-old story that still inspires today. From 1981, it's Chariots of Fire.